under a barrage and went forward and kept sending back thousands and thousands of prisoners.
Over 7,000 German prisoners were taken at Messines, men shaken and unnerved by the huge explosions which had swallowed up many of their comrades. In one concrete shelter, 4 German officers were found sitting round a table, killed by shock. For miles around, it seemed like an earthquake. It was distinctly felt in London. General Plumer's Second Army had won a clear-cut victory. In April, Vimy. In June, Messines. The 2 strongest bastions of the German front had been stormed by the British Army. All the omens seemed favorable for the great offensive. Breaking out of the salient seemed to be only a matter of time and preparation. The army trained and labored at the massive build-up required for a set-piece battle in 1917. They were in good heart. They did not know that ugly clouds were gathering about their enterprise. On June the 19th, Haig was summoned to London to discuss the campaign with the cabinet. The meetings were charged with ill feeling. Distrust between the nation's political leaders and its generals had never been higher.
When Sir Douglas Haig explained his projects to the civilians, he spread on the table a large map and made dramatic use of both his hands to demonstrate how he proposed to sweep up the enemy. First the right hand brushed along the surface irresistibly, then came the left, the outer finger ultimately touching the German frontier, with a nail across. It is not surprising that some of our number were so captivated by the splendor of the landscape opened out to our vision that their critical faculties were overwhelmed.
Lloyd George remained skeptical, but there was a shock in store for him.
A most serious and startling situation was disclosed today. At today's conference, Admiral Jellicoe, as First Sea Lord, stated that owing to the great shortage of shipping due to the German submarines, it would be impossible for Great Britain to continue the war in 1918. This was a bombshell for the cabinet and all present.
Jellicoe insisted that Zeebrugge must be cleared of U-boats. Lloyd George was in a dilemma.
It was decided that I should once more sum up the misgivings which most of us felt, and that the responsibility for decision should be left to Sir William Robertson and Sir Douglas Haig.
Reluctantly, the government gave its authority to the Flanders offensive on the advice of the naval and army leaders. Now the time for talking was drawing to an end. On June the 21st, one of Haig's staff officers wrote,
"The longest day of the year, and we have not yet begun the really big effort. We fight alone here, the only army active. We shall do well, of that there is no reasonable doubt. Have we the time to accomplish?"
Time was inexorably passing. Time while the staffs worked out their detailed plans. Time while roads were laid, mended, relaid and remended. Time while new divisions, including a whole French army, poured into the salient. Time while training received its finishing touches. As each day passed, the signs of coming battle multiplied. Veterans knew now how to interpret them.
Until yesterday, most of those addressing us with a comprehensive sweep of the pointer across the map have declared that by 0 hour, all the German trenches will be obliterated by our shells, a tale we've heard before. The last lecturer, however, ominously omitted to provide this comforting assurance.
The men of 1917 were less easily deluded, less trustful than earlier generations of the war. Too many things had gone wrong.
Good morning, the General said when we met him last week on our way to the line. Now the soldiers he smiled at are most of them dead, and were cursing his staff for incompetent swine. He's a cheery old card, grunted Harry to Jack as they slogged up to Arras with rifle and pack. But he did for them both by his plan of attack.
The last days of July were running out. A certain uneasiness made itself felt, in the line and behind it. A staff officer wrote,
My one fear is the weather. I do not think that we can hope for more than a fortnight's, or at best 3 weeks of really fine weather.
Through the stinking, smoking ruins of Ypres and the shattered villages around it, the troops marched to their positions. Because soldiers like to sing, and because they were still a long way from the end of hope, they marched in singing. But the songs were changing. The sardonic note was more emphatic now.
The entire Ypres salient, to a depth of some 8 miles from the front line, is alive with infantry, artillery, repair workshops, hospitals and ambulances of Gough's Fifth Army in billet, bivouac, mottle-painted tent or hut. The sheds and yards of buildings, copses and all other cover hide tanks, long-range guns, heavy howitzers and ammunition. Tonight we must bivouac. And there seems to be scarcely a bit of vacant ground the size of a football pitch clear of troops, gear, and stores.
Halted against the shade of a last hill, they fed, and lying easy, were at ease, and finding comfortable chests and knees, carelessly slept. But many there stood still to face the stark blank sky beyond the ridge, knowing their feet had come to the end of the world.
Final decisions, final preparations.
I've ordered the provost sergeant with the battalion police to line up in the front trench as soon as the assault starts. They are to arrest any men who return improperly. Although I command a battalion whose courage and loyalty have never given me a trace of anxiety, one must guard against those inexplicable panics which may seize brave men and which are so infectious.
This, by now, was an army of veterans. The men of 1917 were warier, more skillful, but they were less hasty to sacrifice themselves. The war itself was an older and uglier beast. Edmund Blunden wrote,
There were opportunities enough for death or glory, but the experienced sense observed that people did not espouse them with the comparatively bright eye of a year before. 1917 was distasteful.
0 hour was 3:50 a.m. on July the 31st. 9 divisions of the Fifth Army, 5 divisions of the Second Army, and 2 French divisions went over the top. This was the British Army's largest single effort since the Somme, 13 months before. But this was no Somme catastrophe. Yet this was no victory either. This was not a Vimy or a Messines. It was that most delusive of war's products, a half success or half failure. Straight away, 2 persistent features of this battle were seen. Early in the afternoon, rain began to fall. Soon it turned into a drenching torrent. And shortly after the rain began, the German counterattacks started to come in. Up to their knees